And first, let me say, I would like to thank Mitch McConnell for his leadership, and I'd also like to thank Chuck Schumer for the enormous bipartisan support we had on this bill, and the many senators, both Republicans and Democrats, that worked tirelessly over the last 5 days on all the task force. As the President said, I got to live in the LBJ room for the last 5 days, and we couldn't be more pleased with the unprecedented response from the Senate to protect American workers and American business in this situation. The President has outlined many of these, but let me just quickly go through them. Again, small business retention loans. This will cover roughly 50% of the private payroll in small businesses, where we will immediately make loans that will supply 8 weeks of salaries as long as they keep workers employed and overhead. And those loans will be forgiven at the end of the period as long as they keep workers employed. These are SBA loans, but the Treasury will be issuing new regulations authorizing almost every single FDIC-insured bank to make these. I expect by the end of next week, we will have a very simple process where these can be made and dispersed in the same day. So this will be a very simple system to get money into small business hands. For companies that don't qualify that, we have a economic program of tax incentives to retain workers. And as the President said, we have enhanced unemployment insurance for people who don't fit into these two programs that will be administered through the states. We also have economic impact payments. These will be within the next 3 weeks, direct payments into most people's deposit accounts. And for those that don't have it, we will be having the checks in the mail. Treasury will have additional authorities. We have $500 billion that we can use to work with the Federal Reserve for emergency programs that will create up to an additional $4 trillion if needed to support American business and American workers in an unprecedented way. And then finally, the President mentioned $100 billion to hospitals and $150 billion to states that have specific coronavirus expenses, as well as many additional things. Mr. President.
So we learned some really interesting information because obviously the other countries like China and others had been hit prior that we did. One of the things that was striking to me, and I just throw it out because it's something that we will face. We're not facing it now, but we will face. Our Chinese colleagues are very concerned because they went through the entire cycle of the curve to come down. They have very, very few cases. But what they're starting to see as they're relaxing the constraints on travel, that they're getting imported cases. And they wanted to warn us that when we get successful, make sure you very carefully examine how you're going to release the constraints on inputs. So I know we're going to be successful in putting this under control, but I think we're going to have to remember we don't want to import cases in. That's the first thing for today. The second thing that was important is that it was something that Dr. Birx mentioned, and that is when you look at the inflection of the curves, we now have multiple different countries that have gone through various phases of their individual outbreaks. And you could learn something from them about where you are in your own outbreak. For example, when China went up, what happened is they just didn't turn around. They went from going to, I'll just take an arbitrary number, 500 new cases a day. The next day it was 1,000 cases, then 1,500, and then 2,000. But once the number of new cases each day starts to flatten out, that's when you get to that point where the inflection goes down. So what things we want to look for, the things that Dr. Birx had mentioned. That doesn't mean you declare victory when it does that, but you know you're at least on the way to where you want to go. And I think that's really very important. The third and final thing that I think gets back to the question that many of you in the audience have asked of us is about, would this possibly become a seasonal cyclic thing? And I've always indicated to you that I think it very well might. And the reason I say that is that what we're starting to see now in the Southern Hemisphere, in Southern Africa, and in the Southern Hemisphere countries is that we're having cases that are appearing, as they go into their winter season. And if, in fact, they have a substantial outbreak, it will be inevitable that we need to be prepared that we'll get a cycle around the second time. What does that mean for us and what we're doing? It totally emphasizes the need to do what we're doing in developing a vaccine, testing it quickly, and trying to get it ready so that we'll have a vaccine available for that next cycle. In addition, to do the randomized controlled trials of drugs so that we will have a menu of drugs that we have shown to be effective and shown to be safe. Because I know we'll be successful in putting this down now, but we really need to be prepared for another cycle. And what we're doing, I believe, will prepare us well. Thank you.